ik ben Wessel van bitcoinfocus.nl en vandaag spreken we met de Gigi. Hij is een bitcoin schrijver en denker uit Oostenrijk en hij is bekend van artikelen zoals Bitcoin is time, Proofofwork is essential en freedom of value. We spreken hem een uur, veel luisterplezier en ik zou zeggen ga naar bitcoinfocus.nl en word abonnee.
Okay, let's start. You actually just start with a personal history. I think you would probably have told it many times, but how did you start with Bitcoin? When and how?
Yeah, so I come from the technology side of things, or I came from the technology side of things. So I told the story quite a couple of times, but as you know, I'm also pseudonymous, so I never really, gave all the full details and the full background of what exactly I did. But the gist is that I was always interested in computers and especially network computing, and so I ended up studying computer science. And I had my first touch point with Bitcoin was very, very early, but I dismissed it for many, many years. I needed, I think, like 5 touch points to really kind of look deeper into it. I think when I heard it for the third time is when I had my like the first deeper look, and I realized then that was around the time when Mount Gox blew up, I think, was when I had a bit of a closer look. I think my first touch point with Bitcoin was 2013 or so, and people I knew and I worked with, they were already very interested in the technology behind Bitcoin. Like that was even before the whole blockchain narrative was a thing. I had people close to me that were, looking into this blockchain tech and trying to put weather data on the blockchain and those kind of things. And so, and I was just laughing at it all the time because I always thought, it's funny internet money. And I have a prolonged background in gaming and computer games, so I thought I knew, like virtual money can never work. It always gets exploited. It always gets hacked. It always there are always problems. And of course, I knew nothing about money, and I knew nothing about monetary history, nothing about economics, and nothing about Bitcoin really. But I thought I knew things about computer science, and so I dismissed it outright because I thought every computer system can be hacked. And so around the Mt. Gox time, it dawned on me that Bitcoin is still not dead. And soon after, I kind of figured out that this thing is actually like BitTorrent, but for money. And that had me really interested, or that was the beginning of my interest of having a closer look. And so, I ended up quitting my job, lighting my old life on fire, burning everything down. And I've been in full time in Bitcoin now since, I guess, 2017, something like that. It's all a bit blurry, but that's that's the rough story, I guess.
Cool. And you talk about the 5 touching points. Perhaps you can explain. I mean, what is actually the importance of Bitcoin for you?
Well, I think that's a good question. By the 5 touch points, I mean that I needed to hear it like 5 different times from 5 different people until I thought it was not a scam, basically. So I back in the day there was the Slashdot article and there were some like the dollar parity and so on, and I knew that this was happening, but I just always dismissed it and laughed about it, and I never paid real attention to it because I thought it's all stupid. I never cared really about the money. I still don't. I care about fixing the money, but I don't care about riches or anything like that. And to answer your question from a kind of computer science standpoint, Bitcoin actually solves a couple of problems that were thought to be unsolvable, so to speak, And it is interesting just because of that from a computer science standpoint. And I wrote about this extensively, about one of those aspects in one of my articles, Bitcoin is Time, which is actually one of the chapters of an upcoming book that I'm still writing, which is called 21 Ways. And so Bitcoin solves the problem of decentralized timing in an adversarial environment. Building up, the way I phrase it sometimes is it builds up its own era of time in cyberspace. And so it kind of is a roundabout solution to the Oracle problem, which makes it interesting from a computer science standpoint, because the computers always have the problem of garbage in, garbage out. So you can never be sure that the input a computation system receives is actually correct. So you always have to trust those entities that provide the input. And this is a very, very hard problem to solve. And it's called the Oracle problem because the way you usually solve it is you have multiple oracles that you somehow trust, and you just trust in, you distribute the trust in a way that you trust the fact that not all 5 of these oracles will try to scam you, basically. They like, and not, if one is off or two is off in terms of data input, that's not a problem. So if as long as not everyone is conspiring against you, you're still good. And of course, everyone in Bitcoin knows these kind of things, and we often talk about the Byzantine generals problem and how Bitcoin solves the Byzantine generals problem. And the way that it solves it is that in Bitcoin you rely for synchronization, for arriving at a consensus, you rely on the heaviest chain. That's actually also a funny thing that Satoshi called it the longest chain, which is actually wrong. So that was one of Satoshi's mistakes. So that was it was wrong both in the implementation and also in the white paper, and in his description. Like the longest chain would not work, and this actually had to be fixed. So it has to be the heaviest chain.
Okay.
And the way that the reason why it works is because you can trust the data itself, and that's why you can use untrusted middlemen to relay the data. That's you can hand the proof of work to anyone, and they cannot cheat the proof of work. They can, like, it is very much like a it's just, there's no way to cheat the data, very much like a digital signature or something, where it will be immediately obvious that someone tried to cheat it. And the only way to cheat proof of work is to do valid proof of work yourself. That's the only way to cheat it. And so that's not exactly cheating, because then you're helping the system along the way. And so the phrase that one other Bitcoiner used, Adam Gibson, is the reification of information. So that's what proof of work does. That the information speaks for itself and will tell you what happened, what had to happen in the real world. And that's why you can trust the information itself, and you don't have to trust on any inputs that come from the outside world. You don't have to trust on the people that are passing on these messages and so on. And so that's the way that Bitcoin solves the Byzantine generals problem, and that's also the way that Bitcoin solves the Oracle problem. And that's why it's insanely interesting from a computer science perspective, because it is a practical solution to a problem that in theory should be kind of unsolvable. A lot of computer scientists and mathematicians thought that these problems are not really solvable. And I think they're right. Like, I think also the problem of timing is not really solvable. Like the problem of timing in a decentralized system, because we live in a relative universe, and there is no single arrow of time. Like time is relative, and clocks go differently, and depending on how fast they move and how close they are to massive objects and so on. There is no way to agree on a time. There are no simultaneous events in the universe, for example. There just aren't. There are also no simultaneous events on Earth. There just aren't. And that's why we need to readjust the clocks of GPS satellites, for example. But Bitcoin solves this way Bitcoin has a pragmatic solution. The pragmatic solution is like inside a light cone of like 10 minutes, space-time is basically flat. So we just slow down time in a way so that we can agree on one single state across these 10 minutes, which is long enough and big enough for all of Earth to agree on the state. But Bitcoin, for example, like if we would populate the whole galaxy or the whole solar system and we still want to use Bitcoin, that won't work. So it has very real physical limitations, and every system, every large enough system, every decentralized system will run into these limitations. Like because we live in this relativistic universe, there is no way to have a single state in the whole system that works for everyone for like across vast distances of space, because with light speed and so on. And so, yeah, it is interesting, not only from the computer science perspective, but also from the physics and math perspective. But of course, like most people haven't figured that out yet. Most people still think that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme.
Okay, so actually Satoshi created like a different universe?
Yeah, I always like to say, Bitcoin builds up its own space-time in cyberspace, and that's what Satoshi managed to do. And he also knows this. I mean, I wrote also in Bitcoin's time, out of the, I don't know, 9 or so, or how many citations are in the white paper, 8 or 9 or 11 or something, like almost half of them are about timestamping. So timestamping was one of the root problems. You always had to, before Bitcoin, you always had to rely on one central authority to keep the time, because it's just such an incredible difficult problem to solve, because there is no universal time on Earth. And so previous systems always relied on central authorities when it comes to letting everyone in the system know what time it is. And yeah, you needed something like that. And Bitcoin actually fixes this. Bitcoin solved this by creating its own era of time in cyberspace.
Okay, wow. And of course, the whole groundwork, the whole base groundwork of is the proof of work system. I mean, that without a proof of work system, it wouldn't work, right? I mean, it's just
yeah, proof of work is absolutely essential. Proof of work is also what builds up this era of time. So the proof of work, the difficulty adjusted proof of work, is what makes everything work. The second interesting part, because you asked me how is it interesting from a computer science perspective, the second interesting part is actually, I mean, it all hangs together, but is the difficulty adjustment, in the sense that there is no problem that you can pose to a computer where it will be obvious from the outset how long will it take any computer to solve this problem. So I can't come up with a computational mathematical problem and where I can guarantee you it will always take any computer, no matter how fast, 5 minutes to solve. Like, that's impossible, because computers get like 1 billion times faster all the time. You can build special purpose computers and so on. And that was one of the main problems also when creating digital cash. That was the problem that Hashcash had, that if let's say you mine a couple of coins and it was like a Commodore 64. And so it takes you a long time to mine a couple of coins. To mine 100 coins, it takes you a very long time. And so today, like we have, I don't know, a Ryzen or something, like a modern CPU, and suddenly you can mine like 10 trillion coins in like a nanosecond, And so it's very unfair, and suddenly you're back to money printing. And that's why what Nick Szabo called cryptoanalytic stability. So you need a problem that is stable cryptographically. You need a problem that is that has a stable computation time. And the reason why this doesn't exist or can't exist, or why it is so incredibly hard, is that from the outside you cannot know how fast the computer runs. Like there is always this disconnect between our real world and any simulation, which is what a computer is. A computer is more or less performing certain tasks, and it's the example I always like to bring up is, if you have an emulator for old computer games, like to play Super Mario or whatever, and you play it in a very, very modern computer, you have to, artificially slow down the clock speed of your modern computer. Like, the emulator does it for you, because the way that the timing worked in those old games sometimes or most of the time is that you knew like the clock speed of the computer, and you knew how many operations the computer was able to do. So if you do like, let's say 10,000 operations, 1 second passed. And that's how the games were built. And if the computer goes way, way, way faster, then everything goes way, way faster. And suddenly Super Mario runs at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, So, and if you have a bad emulator, this is what happens. And this is all related to the problem of cryptanalytic stability, kind of. That's why it's such a hard problem. Like if you're inside the computer, you don't know how fast the computer is. That's the computer itself cannot figure it out, because the computer itself has no trustless way of verifying what is going on in the outside world. And so that's also what Bitcoin solves, because Bitcoin solves this in a very rough game theoretical way that has an economic component to it, and that's what the difficulty adjustment does. So Bitcoin averages timestamps over long periods of time, like every 2016 blocks, if I'm not mistaken, so roughly 2 weeks, and it readjusts the puzzle difficulty so that on average every new block is found 10 minutes. And it's a very simple mechanism. It's like a thermostat almost. And so the way, like the reason why this is important is because of cryptanalytic stability, and also for timing stability and economic stability, in the sense that no matter how many miners add to the security of Bitcoin over time, the system will always go on. And the system works just the same if it's like two computers, like it was in the beginning with Satoshi and Hal, or if it's like, billions and billions and billions of ASIC chips like it is now. It works all the same, and it works. Internally, it has the same speed, like and that's also what a big misconception what a lot of people have is that mining is not about mining new Bitcoins. Mining is about adding security to the system and keeping the system alive. And the Bitcoins are created in time, and the issuance is already fixed. That's why we know, like every 10 minutes, new Bitcoins get issued. It's not like with every new megawatt, new Bitcoins get issued. No, that's not the case. It's like every 10 minutes. And that's why we know up until the year 2140, new Bitcoins will be issued. And mining will go on after that. Like mining in the sense of securing the network and, the ASICs running, they will still be running. It's just that the issuance will stop. And that's why Bitcoin is perfect money, because it's bound to time and it's not bound to energy. And the issuance schedule is also bound to time and not to energy. Security is bound to energy, but nothing else is.
Okay. And the hashing rate is still growing. So there's still companies, more capital investing in these machines, in these ASIC chips to secure the network, or to in their case to find Bitcoins, I think. But
yeah, of course. I mean, it's the reward is still large enough so that it is economical to get into the game. And also these people obviously speculate that there will be an increasing demand for censorship resistant hard money. And I mean, basically the best liquid asset that the world has ever seen. And as long as demand increases, because we have a perfectly fixed supply, price will increase as well. And that's the economic calculation the miners make. So Bitcoin is basically a buyer of last resort when it comes to energy. And it makes a lot of sense if you're an energy producer or someone who has access to cheap energy to just mine and let Bitcoin pay you for your efforts.
And you have no doubt that when of course we have a halving 2024, etc. You have no doubt that the miners will still be around when their rewards will be how do you say, will just be the commissions for the transaction commissions.
I mean, historically, we have seen that fees can get very high if demand gets very high, if demand for block space gets very high. We saw that in the insane run-up of 2017, where the fees actually, like for a short period of time, miners made more in fees than in block rewards. So we kind of see that when the demand is there, it works. And so it all breaks down to bare economics, and it's a very simple economic calculation. So if you're profitable, you switch on the ASICs. If you're not, you switch them off. It's very easy. And so it all comes down to your operational costs, and which means how cheap is the electricity that you get. And currently with the recent price crash and so on, it's like if you're below like 3 cents per kilowatt hour, then you're still economical currently. If you're not, then you're not. But that's a very extreme scenario currently. But it's because it's like a self-adjusting system that has this kind of thermostat in the sense of because we have the difficulty adjustment, miners will always be around. Like as I said before, miners were around when it was just like one machine, one computer, which was Satoshi, and when it was two, same thing. Like people were mining, and Bitcoin had zero value, like 0.0. Bitcoin had no monetary value whatsoever. And mining was done because mining needs to be done for the whole system to work, and people will do it just because. Like we saw it in the past before Bitcoin began to monetize, people mined as well. And that's why I'm very confident that, like ideologically aligned people like myself, I will always mine probably. Like if if mining is about to stop, I will switch on whatever ASICs and put it in the museum just because. So you always have this kind of fraction of the population as well. We see this very well also with running Tor nodes, seeding torrents, those kind of things. There's no monetary value there, no economic incentives at play at all, and people still do it. And so we have to, like, to be clear, it's all based in economics in Bitcoin, but still, like, even if the economic incentives would kind of won't be there for a short period of time, people will just mine because their belief in the whole thing is so strong and because they're ideologically aligned. But again, we have the difficulty adjustment, so the miners that are not profitable will turn on, mining will get easier, mining will become more profitable in turn, and those who are profitable will still mine, and then it will become more profitable again over time, even if demand for Bitcoin just stays constant because of the halvings and all the rest of it, and then miners will switch on again. So there is no reason to be worried about anything like that at all.
Okay. You personally, yourself, you still mine, or on a
I currently don't.
Okay.
But it's only because I don't believe in cloud mining, and I'm currently mobile, basically without a home. So I just don't have any way to plug in machines. But I will definitely mine again in the future. I mined in the past. It was always just a hobby. It was always just to. I was never like terribly profitable or anything like that. I never had any big operations, but I did a little bit of mining in the past on various things. Yeah, exactly. Just to it's depending on where you are in your Bitcoin journey. It begins, I think, with getting a little bit of exposure. So you want to have some Bitcoin. So you want to have some sats to your name. And if you want to do it properly, you have to hold your own keys. Like we have all these things, and as the crypto Ponzi schemes unwind now, we can clearly see that these are not just sayings; they are absolutely essential. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. So you will have to hold your own keys. But it doesn't stop there, because what Bitcoin is a very individual thing. Bitcoin is a very individual thing. No one can tell you what Bitcoin is. You have to decide for yourself what Bitcoin is. And so you have to run your own node, like not your node, not your rules. You absolutely have to decide what Bitcoin is for you. And then you express your opinion by running a node, by telling the world, these are my consensus parameters. This is Bitcoin for me, and this is what I accept. And this will always be a moving target. We will always have, some disagreements. There will be some soft forks. There might even be hard forks in the future. Like there will be one bug, like the date bug in, I don't know, like 80 years from now or 180 years from now. I don't even know how long it is away, but it's quite a while away. And so far, no one has figured out yet how to fix it without a hard fork. And so the question, what Bitcoin is kind of not really answerable, because what is Bitcoin? Is it like the first version that Satoshi ever released? As I said in the beginning, it had some bugs. So that's not a really good answer. Is it like, is it Bitcoin with Taproot or without Taproot? Is it Bitcoin with SegWit or without SegWit? I know some people that are running non-SegWit clients because they still don't believe in SegWit, because SegWit was an effective block size increase, and they think, like they're religious about it, and some things in Bitcoin are holy and we must not touch them. And because SegWit was an effective block size increase by segregating the witness, and like we have larger than 1 megabyte blocks now. Like if you want to look into it, that's why also the weighting changed from byte to virtual bytes and so on. And so, okay, what is Bitcoin? Like Are those people not running Bitcoin? Yeah, of course they are running Bitcoin. It's still backward compatible. It still syncs. They're still in consensus and so on. They can't use the Lightning Network, of course, but they don't care probably. And so this question of what Bitcoin is, so you will have to answer it yourself. And the reason why I'm going on this long rant is, in the end, you probably also want to, if you're holding like a lot Bitcoin, if you're a nation state or something like that, you probably want to provide your own hash rate, even if you're just a large company. Like if you're Oracle and you're putting like 80% of your cash balance sheet into Bitcoin, you probably want to mine yourself, because in the end, Bitcoin censorship resistance comes from the fact that you can bribe miners. And if you don't find anyone to bribe, then you will have to provide your own hash rate. And that's why it's censorship resistant. Anyone can mine, no permission asked. Like you don't need to ask for anyone's permission to generate a private key, to hold your own keys, to have 12 words on your head, to plug in a machine that uses some electricity and point a satellite dish to the Blockstream satellite. Like anyone can do that, and that's why it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and also on a personal level, the privacy. For privacy, it's also good to mine yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Because of all these KYC procedures.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's dive back into the computer scientist the principles. Actually, we've talked about a few of them. Are there other aspects of Bitcoin that makes it so important that it fixes actually the problems of our current money?
Let me rephrase the question and answer it in two ways.
Yeah.
Because you mixed up two things. You mixed up the computer science and the economics, kind of. And I think the question could be: the internet is broken. Does Bitcoin fix the internet? And also, the economy is broken. Does Bitcoin fix the economy?
Yeah, correct. It's two different questions. Yeah.
And so I would say yes to both, because I think the monetization model of the internet is broken because everything is built on advertisements, and advertisement is basically spyware, and so spying on users and selling user data. And I think with the emergence of podcasting 2.0 and value for value models, Bitcoin can definitely fix the monetization structure of the internet. And the reason is that it reverts back to an old idea where someone provides a service, you hand over some cash, and that's it. Done. You just paid for it, and that's it. And you don't have to know, like you as the merchant don't have to know anything about the customer. You can trust the money. You don't have to trust the customer. And that's exactly what value for value provides as well. Like you don't need to identify the people that are giving you money. And also just by providing plain services, we can see this already with, VPN services that take Lightning and those kind of things. SMS services, or like text messaging, or phone number services and email services that you can pay Lightning without identifying yourself at all. And I think it's a more honest, more direct model of monetizing things online. And especially with value for value. I wrote a very long article about this called The Freedom of Value. And it's the problem with monetizing stuff online is like information wants to be free. So if you write a blog post and you want to sell this blog post, it doesn't make sense to sell this blog post like an Apple. It doesn't make sense to sell, like here is 1 unit of my blog post and it costs, I don't know, like 5 cents or what have you. So because you can replicate it like a gazillion times at no cost. And so selling information on a per unit basis doesn't make any sense. And the reason why I say all this is because the value for value model tries to flip the whole thing on its head, and it's paywalls also don't work, because with paywalls you're gating content, and really good content always gets free because you can just, one person pays the paywall, takes a screenshot of the article and posts it on social media, and suddenly the paywall is gone. Like that's just how it works. Information can be copied with perfect fidelity, and that's why paywalls, why selling information never works. And so I'm very bullish on the value for value concept, and I think it can work for any medium. It obviously works for podcasts. I think it works also for written content. I think it will work for books. A friend of mine showed that it also works for movies. It's a German movie called Human Bee, which is a movie about Bitcoiners, and he ran it. He gave it away for free, and at the end of the movie, it's like, if you enjoyed this movie, consider giving some value back and here's the web address to do so. And someone gave him a full Bitcoin, like many other people gave, cents and so on. But he was very successful in just trying out the value for value model, and it's a very good movie. So I'm not surprised that someone who probably has a little bit more than one Bitcoin got a lot of value out of it. And I think it can also work for audiobooks and all the rest of it, any kind of digital media. And so yeah, Bitcoin can fix the internet, and because we are not reliant on identity anymore in that big of a way. The whole surveillance machinery of the advertisement model will hopefully get reduced over time and eventually fall away completely almost. And people, like very serious people with deep pockets, are currently working on stuff like that. Obviously, Jack Dorsey with his Web5 initiative with Block and DBD, they announced just recently that they're very close to putting the final touches of on the first version of like a new web architecture, which is built around decentralized identifiers, which are built on the work of Daniel Buchner, who was with Microsoft, and Project Ion, which are decentralized identifiers that anchor into the Bitcoin blockchain, because you always need like this one source of truth that takes care of key rollovers and like those identity changes and those kind of things. So these are very, very difficult problems to solve, but very serious people, serious in the sense of they know what they're doing, are working on this and are trying to solve them. And I'm actually very bullish on the whole, on all the things that TBD is working on, and on the whole Web5 idea, even though the name is a meme, but it's like it's a playful nod towards Web3 and the failure of Web3, I would say. But I think all of that is very, very promising, and I think Bitcoin will fix the internet. That was a very long answer, but I'll come to the second one immediately. So will Bitcoin fix the economy? I think everyone realizes now that the economy is kind of broken in at least 25 different ways. And I think the root of it all is easy money and fiat money, and the fact that governments and central banks can create money out of thin air. And, if money is freer than free, then bad things are going to happen. I mean, that's just always what happened in history. If you can print the money, you will always find an emergency to print more money. We saw this very clearly with COVID, for example, and also with other things, with any war as well. Like we need, also with the great financial crisis, we need, bailouts for the big banks. We need bailouts for this industry. We need, a couple of $1 trillion for this war, and we need a couple more $1 trillion for this pandemic. And of course, money is a very important tool for society. And so any economy that is based on a money where the language of value is broken in such an important way, it will just go haywire. And I think that's what we are seeing now. And we see this again with, liquidity injections, QE, Infinity, all kinds of bailouts. And they're just trying to taper and kind of, paint over the cracks that are forming in the system. But as I think it was Max Kaiser who said, you can't taper a Ponzi. And so basically, the whole system, it's not too different from a Ponzi scheme, because the thing about fiat money is it's not rooted in any reality. It's just it's made up at its core. Like the base layer is made up, and so it's all a confidence game. And so if you are confident in the United States government, and especially its military, and their ability to force the whole world to use their worthless US dollar tokens, then you can be confident in the system. But I think we are currently at an inflection point where this is changing, and the confidence can be lost quite quickly, and then things are going to fall down really quickly. And of course, like more fiat currencies, every government currency is a fiat currency. So it's not only about the US dollar, it's also about the euro and the yen and so on and so forth. And for the euro, for example, I'm not very bullish. Like I don't think the euro has many years to live anymore. Maybe a decade when it comes to it, but I don't know. It's very hard to give predictions on these things. Like the gold bugs have been saying that everything will implode for decades already, and they have been wrong so far. So some people think that we have still multiple decades to go in the fiat system, and maybe they're right. I hope they're right. I hope that the transition will go slowly. And so the final answer to the second question is that, yeah, Bitcoin will fix the economy in the long run, because Bitcoin is an alternative system where bailouts are impossible. And we see this very clearly now with the current crypto bailout, with the current crypto meltdown. There are no bailouts, so everything just has to unwind, and the stupid ideas will painfully go away. And people will lose money, and the money and the value that comes with it will be reallocated, and whatever works will work in the future, and what doesn't work will implode, and that's just the way it should be.
And do you on the spectrum of market versus state? I mean, of course, you have within the Bitcoin community, you have like the hardcore libertarians, and you have also, of course, people who still believe there will be some kind of function for a central authority. How can I scale you on that spectrum on a personal level?
That's a good question. I don't know, actually. I sometimes refer to myself as a minarchist. So I'm not a full-blown anarchist. I think I would rather have a central police force than roaming gangs, so to speak, or different mafia fractions that you have to pay a certain amounts of money so that they might protect you, or at least not rob you, or what have you. I don't know. I really, again, I was very much a normie before I came to Bitcoin, and I was just a regular computer scientist. So those anarchist ideas and so on, they are quite still, I wouldn't say new to me, but I'm skeptical that full anarchy could work, because for example, like 2% of the population are just psychopaths. That's just, that's just a fact. We have to find a way to deal with the psychopaths, for example. And it's a very hard problem. I don't know. I think one idea that I really like is the idea of free private cities. And basically you have multiple small city-states, the smaller the better, that compete with each other, that have all kinds of different setups when it comes to governance, and you can just very easily hop from one jurisdiction to the other. So a lot of the, I mean, I would consider myself a libertarian by now, for sure. I think it's obviously true that goods and services and people have to be able to cross borders freely, because if they don't, then armies will. That's how the saying goes. And I think if we can build a world where we have 100,000 different Liechtensteins and a couple more Switzerlands and so on, I think that would be good. I don't think that. I think the smaller the state, the better. That's why I sometimes call myself an anarchist. But the honest answer is I don't know. I don't know what it's very hard to. I don't think we should scrap it all and start from scratch. I think there's a lot of wisdom to be found for whatever worked for like thousands of years, and there's I mean, some Bitcoiners are huge fans of monarchy, and I mean, Liechtenstein is a monarchy, for example. And yeah, that might work, but there's also something to be said about having the ability to kill the king, so to speak, by voting and not by actually killing him. But I think I think democracy, I mean, there are all these sayings, like that democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other form that we tried so far. And so I'm also not a huge fan of democracy. So don't get me wrong. I think it definitely has its problems. And I'm also like, because I have very low exit costs and I can switch jurisdictions very easily. I haven't voted for the longest time, so I just currently I don't feel the need to participate in politics at all, because I think the solutions are to be found somewhere else. But that is a very, very unique position that I find myself in, and I realized that almost no one can afford to have this position, so to speak. So yeah, it's a very tough problem. I don't have a good answer.
only one or two options, high inflation or recession, etc. And it seems to me, okay, what kind of role can Bitcoin play for people? I mean, it's also. I'm looking for.
Don't get me wrong. I think Bitcoin will fix all this. So Bitcoin fixes absolutely everything.
Fixes it all.
Because I think Bitcoin can only grow. I think Bitcoin is kind of a one-way street. Once you understand certain things, you're not going back. Very much like someone in Venezuela will not go. If he manages to hold US dollars, he will not go back to the Venezuelan Bolivar. Like if you especially if you discover the reasons behind that, and that's not even a requirement, but especially if you figure out why some money is better than other money, and why you should hold some things and not other things, and why some things can be taken away from you and others cannot. And Bitcoin is the only thing that no one can ever take away from you. You cannot be stolen from in Bitcoin. That's one of the tenets of Bitcoin. Like, do not steal from me. You cannot steal from Bitcoiners. You cannot steal by inflation. You cannot steal by confiscation. Like 12 words in someone's head. Try to steal that. It is unconfiscatable if custodied correctly and so on. And so Bitcoin provides this exit option. And I think that is something that is very powerful. And on a long enough time scale, because you cannot steal from people, Bitcoin will defund governments. And that's just a fact. That's that's a logical conclusion of how the system works. That governments need to take from the productive population, and they have two ways to do that: either taxation or inflation. Currently, most money is taken via inflation because taxes are really unpopular. It's very hard to convince a population of your political things and run around and collect money from them basically by force. Like if you're not paying your taxes, you will land in jail, and that's why taxation is paying your taxes. It's not optional. That's why it's taxes are collected by force. And so the state has a monopoly on violence, and that's why they can collect taxes, and everyone who does not like to pay taxes will end in jail, and so on and so forth, or worse. And the thing about inflation is that it's basically a shadow tax, and it's so unjust because inflation is most painful for those who do not hold any other assets, and so it's the poorest 95% of the population is hit hardest by inflation. And it's if you're living hand to mouth and you only have a couple of whatever fiat currency you have in your bank account or under the mattress, inflation will eat you alive, and the hamster wheel that you find yourself in will speed up, and that's why it's so insidious. And like almost all of government spending currently is financed by inflation and just printing money. And so, Bitcoin definitely fixes this, because as more people exit into the Bitcoin economy and use Bitcoin as a store of value, and also use Bitcoin to do business with other Bitcoiners and other people just in general, it will be very, very hard to steal from the productive part of the population. And that's why Bitcoin will fix this as well. How long it will take, no one knows. Like this might take a long time. It depends all on education, and I think it depends on how painful it will be for people, because people aren't stupid. I always bring up the same example where when during the Arab Spring, they tried to turn off the internet, but turning off the internet is really hard because you can use VPNs and different DNS settings and so on. And so it took like 8 hours or so for everyone to figure out how to change the DNS settings, because there were people marching in the streets and they were doing graffiti on the walls on how to change the DNS settings to something that works. And so people, if shit really hits the fan, if they are forced to learn, people will learn. And so it depends on the circumstances, like how quickly can you realize that Bitcoin is the exit, and how quickly can you realize that Bitcoin is actually not fun and games, and it's not a joke, and it's not a Ponzi scheme, but it's a life raft. And so it will depend on your situation. And people only learn like if they're either curious or if the pain is big enough. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole issue.
Yeah, if the pain is big enough, for instance, we live in the Western world, so I've heard someone from Africa said to me, okay, the only time people come in resistance is when people are hungry. There's no urgency at this moment to go to this new system. So.
Yeah, absolutely. For most people, there isn't. It's just that's also. I recently attended the Oslo Freedom Forum, and there were a lot of human rights activists there, and a lot of Bitcoiners. And for the first time at the Freedom Forum, there was a big financial freedom track that put Bitcoin front and center, and showed that there are a lot of people in the world that absolutely need to use Bitcoin. Otherwise, they're dead, basically. So and most people don't realize this. Most people, especially in the Western world, don't realize this. Bitcoin is the only way to receive money if your government in question wants to deplatform you from the banking system. Bitcoin is the only way to leave your country with your wealth intact if you actually have to leave. Bitcoin is the only way to send money to your family if your family is in dire circumstances and lives in a country where sending money is very, very hard. Bitcoin is the only money where you need to ask for no permission to hold it, to receive it, to send it. And it's the only money that cannot be inflated away. And there are many, many countries where inflation is a big problem. Like there are multiple countries going through hyperinflation right now, and other countries are very close to it. And most Westerners don't realize this. And so I would urge everyone to watch the recordings of the Oslo Freedom Forum. Both days were recorded, and just look into the writings of Alex Gladstein and all the people that Human Rights Foundation, all the people that he highlights in his writings, and the things that they went through, and the stories they have to tell. So all the Silicon Valley bros and all the rich billionaires that will tell you that Bitcoin is useless, they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. They're so insanely privileged, both financially and also in just every aspect of life, that they have no clue what they're talking about. Bitcoin is not only useful, Bitcoin is absolutely essential to millions of people around the world. And it will be billions of people very soon. Most people haven't realized this yet, but Bitcoin is as important as strong encryption, for example. If you are a dissident or a journalist or someone who wants to topple a dictator, or someone who wants to put up a political resistance, or someone who wants to flee the country, or someone who is just in the strangest and direst of political circumstances, you absolutely need strong encryption to organize yourself. There is no other way. If you can be spied upon, you will be dead. And the same is true for this is for communication flows, and the same is true for monetary flows. The first thing that a dictator will do if some resistance comes up is freeze everyone's bank account, make sure that no one is able to feed themselves, basically. And that's how important Bitcoin is, and that's why I'm I'm almost done arguing this point, because it's just so obvious in now. Like, it should be obvious to everyone, and I hope that very soon it will be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely clear. And so just in practice, in a truly emergent state, when you have to flee, just remember those 12 words, and don't get caught. Actually, I mean, because when people point a gun to your head, then of course they can still get those words out of you, perhaps.
Yeah.
In a theoretical sense.
Well, but that's the perfect example, because that shows you how powerful Bitcoin truly is. Because let's see what alternative you have. The banking system is a no-go. Like, you probably won't even be able to hold a bank account, because your banking system is tied to your identity. And if those people that are against you know your identity, they will just cancel your bank accounts, freeze your bank accounts, deplatform you from the banking system. The same is true for all other money systems like Venmo or PayPal or all the rest of it. Gold is an alternative, for example, but the only way to transport gold across borders is to have it in your body, and the border control officers will actually check, and there are x-rays and so on. And that's not a very good strategy, and you can't even transport large sums of gold that way. And you can't bring it with you in a bag. Like, if you are if you are actually part of a political resistance or something, and you try to cross a border, they will take everything from you, like absolutely everything. And so with the 12 words in your head, you can actually do this with Bitcoin, and the value itself is actually stored in these 12 words. And if you don't have another copy, they will have to beat it out of you, and you still have to give it up willingly. And that's how important Bitcoin is. That's how powerful Bitcoin is. And you can still shut up, and you can just die, and they don't get your Bitcoin. And everyone else's Bitcoin will be worth more in the process. I always jokingly say, inheritance is built in Bitcoin, because lost Bitcoin makes everyone else's Bitcoin just more valuable. So you can decide to die with these 12 words in your head, and the regime in question will not get anything from you. And that's why I say no one can take your Bitcoin. Bitcoin says like Bitcoin is one of those people, it doesn't say a lot. It's very quiet always. But one of the things it says is you cannot steal from me, period, no matter what. And so that's how powerful Bitcoin is. And people actually did this. People actually, cross borders and fled from the countries and so on. Like you don't even have to go back in time that long. Just with the Russian-Ukraine conflict, plenty of people did this. So there are plenty of stories that you can look into that they did exactly that. And they were able to escape with most of their net worth intact. And that's very, very powerful.
The thing is with Bitcoin, it's still attached to this fiat system. Huh? I mean, we have all these exchanges. We have euro and dollar exchange of Bitcoin, of course. So we need more adoption of countries to actually use Bitcoin, to use the Satoshis as a payment, or?
I think in general, Bitcoin is kind of fine as it is. So it's. I think it will just take time. People don't realize how insanely early we still are. Most people have heard of Bitcoin by now, but very, very, very few people hold Bitcoin, and even few people have any idea what Bitcoin is or understand it to any meaningful degree. Like most people don't even realize that it's base money. They don't realize that it's comparable to gold back when the whole world was on the gold standard. That's what we are talking about. It's not any of the other cryptos. It's not a stock. It's not a, like whatever foreign market currency. It's not another fiat currency and so on. So that's most people are just full of misconceptions when it comes to Bitcoin. And to be fair, it's very young. And I think most Bitcoiners also did not understand Bitcoin before we, for example, had the fork wars and so on. It was very unclear what it was, like what is Bitcoin. And I think everyone is still kind of trying to figure out what Bitcoin is. Most people don't know what money is. And so that's one of the main problems, I would say. And in terms of Bitcoin becoming a currency and eventually becoming the unit of account. So money basically has three functions: store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. It's all medium of exchange, actually, because store of value just means that you're exchanging it at a way, 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 way later date. So you're using it as a medium of exchange with your future self. And if the money is big enough, so money is just a good like every other good, according to the Austrian school, at least. And in a free market, money will always emerge. That's why cigarettes are used as money in prison, for example. And that's why money also emerges in computer games and so on. Like money, you need money for multiple things: to store value, to facilitate trade, and so on. And if the money is big enough, like if money is the most liquid good, like you can always get rid of your money and get something in return. That's not true for fridges or for socks or for what have you. Not everyone will buy your used socks off you, but everyone will take, $100 bill, for example. And that's because the US dollar is just universally accepted. It's the largest money, the most liquid good, basically worldwide. It's that's still the world we are living in. I believe in the future it will be Bitcoin. It just takes time. And the reason why it takes time is because everyone has to understand this one by one and opt into the system. Bitcoin is an opt-in, optional, voluntary system, as opposed to fiat money, where you're forced by law to use it. And of course, nation-state adoption could accelerate the process, but I'm not sure if I'm a big fan of nation-state adoption as it has happened in El Salvador, because it is, again, done by top-down rule. I would rather take the hands-off approach and let people figure it out, and everyone will learn in time. And Bitcoin is a bottom-up phenomenon, and I think it will just continue to grow and spread bottom-up. And over time, more and more people will have a larger amount of the net worth in Bitcoin. More and more companies will have Bitcoin on the balance sheet. More and more people will be willing to spend Bitcoin, because if 99% of your net worth is in Bitcoin and you have an emergency, you will be forced to spend Bitcoin. If you're earning Bitcoin outright, you will be forced to spend Bitcoin. And make no mistake, this will take a long time. And in most countries, you will be forced to use fiat currencies to pay your taxes and to do other things. Most merchants will not adopt it. But I think also it can happen really quickly, because there are many countries in the world already where cashless payments are the norm, where you just tap a card or where you pay with your phone or whatever. And Lightning already works in exactly the same way. And I'm very bullish on, the NFC technology that is now being integrated into various Lightning wallets and Lightning products. And you just tap your damn phone or you tap your card or whatever. And if the merchant accepts, the merchant doesn't even have to accept sets straight. Like the merchant can accept euros, for example, and the conversion happens in the background that the merchant will actually get euros, but Lightning will be used as a payment rail. That's what Jack Mallers is working on with Strike, obviously. But more and more merchants will want to hold the percentage or whatever they make in Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and then things get really interesting. So I think it's just a matter of time and a matter of market size. And Bitcoin is still way smaller than gold. And so Bitcoin will have to eat up gold first in terms of market capitalization. And Bitcoin has so much room for growth. I think global monetary store of value, US dollar denominated assets are like 900 trillion or so. Like this includes bonds and real estate and gold and so on. And Bitcoin is, it used to be a $1 trillion asset, which is still insanely small. And now it's like, I don't know, half of that. And we still have to just, we have to make sure that Bitcoin just operates as it operated in the past, which I think, there's nothing we really need to do. And so Bitcoin will remain the hardest asset, the best money we ever had. More money will flow into, more value will be allocated. And we have certain barriers when we break this in terms of market capitalization. Way more money will flow in. Like the pension funds cannot even go into Bitcoin yet because Bitcoin is so small. And so once Bitcoin hits like 10 trillion in market capitalization, things will, we will be at the next stage of Bitcoin's life, and things will get more interesting again because large pools of money will flow in. And also, like large companies like Oracle, they have 0 Bitcoin to the name. And we're insanely early when it comes to nation state adoption and even like company adoption. Michael Saylor was just the first very crazy one that put Bitcoin on his balance sheet in a big way. And there are way, way, way more public companies that will be forced to put a larger allocation into Bitcoin because the fiat balances are just melting away just because of the money printing alone.
How do you cope with the bear market? Is it of any of your interest? I mean,
which bear market?
I saw your
Bitcoin
timeline.
has been in a bull market since 2009. No, I don't have to cope at all. I'm not leveraged. I practice what I preach. I stay humble and I stack. I still have monetary inflows, so I still earn and make money, and I live below my means, and the rest I stack, and I just don't worry at all. I mean, for those who, the first cycle is always the hardest. So those who came in, I don't know, in 21 or 22 or something, and discovered Bitcoin and thought hyper Bitcoinization is imminent, and they just put a large chunk of their net worth into Bitcoin, and maybe even took out a loan or two to buy more Bitcoin. That's very, very harsh and very painful to live through. But everyone has to learn. Most people have to learn the hard way, and so Bitcoin and leverage just don't mix. So the way to survive the bear market is just listen to the maximalists. That's it. Stay humble, stack sats, hold your own keys. That's it. Like, don't play any stupid games. Don't get greedy. You like, if you are into Bitcoin now, you are still like the earliest of the early adopters. So there is no need to get greedy. Just be long-term greedy and stay humble and stack and hold your own keys. That's all you have to do. And then you cannot be rug pulled. You cannot get wrecked. You cannot get liquidated. Don't overextend yourself. You still need to eat. You still need to, pay rent or whatever. Just stay humble and stack. Do it for a while. And then these 50% downturns, and like, make no mistake, it's only like 50%, or I don't know. I don't even keep track. I have stopped watching the price many years ago. I just know it from Twitter memes. But it's like we had like 80%, 90% downturns in the past. And these are insane opportunities. If you understand Bitcoin on a deep level and its monetary properties and what is going on in the world, and if you still have some dry powder or what have you, it's cheap sats. And my recommendation has remained the same for many years now. Again, just like Matt Odell always says, I mean, it's not my meme, it's not my idea. It's his ingenious shortcut is to stay humble and stack. And both things are very important, especially the stay humble part. Don't get greedy. Don't overextend yourself. Don't take out a loan. Don't, I don't know, just don't do anything stupid. The Bitcoin is savings technology first and foremost. So do whatever you are good at. Provide value to the world. It doesn't matter what you do. If it's mowing lawns, then mow some lawns and be really good at that. Then you will provide value. You will have some money. Take some amount of that, something that doesn't really hurt you, something that you can absolutely spare, and put it into Bitcoin. And I personally believe the best way to do this is to completely automate it, so you don't have the psychological burden of always having to decide: do I buy now? Do I buy on Friday? Do I buy on Monday? Do I buy, and so on and so forth. And you're not. Like, I think trading is insanely stupid. Like, I even think buying the dips is kind of stupid, So I know I kind of contradict myself now, but I try to not buy dips ever, because I just set up my life that I know, okay, I live well below my means, and everything else I just I never have dry powder. So I just set it up in a way that everything is automated.
Yeah.
And many people do this, like you can buy every day, you can buy every week. There are very many good services that can do this. There are many services that can do this with light KYC. You have to be, of course, you have to know the implications. All of these stacking services have KYC implications, and the only way, unfortunately, to get your hands on no KYC Bitcoin is through peer-to-peer exchanges, or a very good way is also mining or earning sets, like with podcasting 2.0 and those kind of things. That's also very good. But just, if you have to think about buying Bitcoin, you're kind of doing it wrong. Like, you just have to, you find a way to get sats streaming in always, and that will be good, and you don't have to think about it. And the easiest way to do this for most people is just with auto DCA. So auto stacking services, automatic savings plan that buy on a recurring basis, no matter the price. And also, a second note on that, if you have an easy way to sell your Bitcoin, you're also doing it wrong. Your Bitcoin should be in cold storage for the long term on a hardware wallet or a multi-sig setup, where you have to ask your lawyer and your wife and another Bitcoin knife, like, can I touch my Bitcoin, please? And that's a proper setup. But if you can panic and sell your Bitcoin, your cold storage setup is shit. So just set yourself up, but protect yourself from your future self.
And it's quite hard. I mean, still people who are for years in the industry are still coping with this. To put 100% in the cold storage. It's a next step.
It is hard. It is hard because people like to gamble. People think they're smarter than everyone else. People like to, what did I think it was Buffett that said, no one likes to get rich slowly. Everyone likes to get rich quickly, and that's why people start to gamble, start to, I don't know, lend out their Bitcoin to get some interest on it, and leverage trade and all the rest of it. I don't do any of it. I think it's terribly stupid. I think if you understood Bitcoin properly, and if you know what it can be and what it might be in the future, just staying humble and stacking you'll do way, way, way better than like 99.99999% of the people. It's like American Hodl said, it's very simple, but it's not easy. But it is very simple. Everyone can do it. It just takes some discipline.
Yeah. Okay. Very insightful, Gigi. It's more of a technical question. For instance, when you, of course, the wallet breathes, and for example, when you one of the settings is, for instance, 5 Satoshi per minute. You also pay 1 Satoshi for routing fees and 1 Satoshi to the podcast index, for example. So that's already 20% of every micro payment are these additional costs. So is there some kind of solution within Lightning, within the Lightning network, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, the Lightning network is so ridiculously young still. I think everyone is still trying to figure this stuff out as we go along. So, for example, fees will be way, way, way lower if you if more people use a custodial solution, which I'm not advocating, but I think you will always have this trade-off. And I think, well, there's no free lunch. If you want to have the hardest money in a peer-to-peer decentralized setting, you will have to pay some fees for routing. You will have to pay some fees for liquidity and so on. I think what we desperately need in Lightning is the liquidity layer. So what I think Roy even coined this term of liquidity service providers. Roy from Greece, and there are some interesting problems that still need to be solved in Lightning. And one is about very similar to problems with the internet, where we have to provide internet, like the last mile problem. Like we have all these fiber optic backbones and everything is perfect between the ISPs and so on. But providing internet, that the last mile to the actual houses is very tricky. And so I think the same is true on Lightning with just providing liquidity to the end user, because you will need incoming liquidity, or like depending on your use case, you need incoming or outgoing liquidity. If you want to do it in a self-sovereign, self-hosted, non-custodial way, like all of that is tricky, because Lightning, you need to be online, you need to have access to a node, you need to, you just need several things for it to. You need to have access to several things to use it in a proper trust minimized non-custodial way. And so all of that is tricky. I think another problem that still needs to be solved is the problem of multipath payments, which Rene Picard is working on and did some great work. I think this is basically solved on at least according to Rene. I looked into it a little bit, but I'm just too stupid to understand all the math. So according to Rene, the problem is basically solved, and it's just about implementing it and also changing the Lightning infrastructure in a sense that all the channels need to run on a zero base fee, which the base fee is not really required. It was kind of a quirky addition, I think, by the L&D team. And so all of these things are being figured out. And I think if we have multipath payments, if we have better liquidity, if we have better path finding, if we have more reliable routing nodes, if we have all that, the fees might go down. Because I think, the fees, depending on which route you take, the fees might be very high. And if you don't need to take the most expensive routes, then you can bring the fees down. In terms of the cuts that are taken by the podcast index or by Breeze, I think all of these are fair. They are the trailblazers. They're the first services that implemented this. They are the absolute pioneers that are building this out. In the end, all of this will come down because it's an open voluntary system. And you can also, like Breeze, for example, is open source. You can fork it, you can run it yourself, and you can set the fee to 0. Like no one is stopping you from doing that. And the same is true for Podcast Index. So I think it will be a race to the bottom. In terms of fees, I think it will just take some time for the technology to improve and the competition to catch up.
Yeah. Okay. And one of the problems, of course, perhaps at this moment is a value for value. It's of course a very interesting concept, and your article is perfectly written to actually explain the concept. But of course, one of the problems will be that there will be fluctuating income for artists or creatives. My question is, for if you are fully dependent on podcasting 2.0, not everyone is a Joe Rogan or a Lex Friedman, so it will be difficult at this time. Yeah.
I don't know if that is true. I kind of disagree that this will be true. I think it is beyond early for podcasting 2.0. Like 6 months ago, it was like 20 podcasts. 12 months ago, podcasting 2.0 basically did not exist. The concept of streaming sets almost did not exist. And so how long did it take for YouTubers and YouTube to figure out how to make money? I don't know, 10 years, 15?
Yeah,
I don't know. True. It took a very, very, very long time. And now everyone knows how to do it. You create a thumbnail that looks like you hit your toe on the nightstand, or you stepped on a Lego, and you just say like, subscribe, hit the bell button, and you get like 25 different sponsors, and you get mid-roll ad reads and all the rest of it. Like that's how they figured out how to make money. And I think we will take, I hope it will not take us 10 or 15 years to figure out how to make money. Some people figured it out already, Adam Curry, first and foremost. And it's a very, very different model, and it has to work very differently. It's way more direct, it's way more honest, it's way more participatory. And so you have to find ways to engage the audience in different ways and to include the audience in your production and to provide more value for the audience so they will give more value back. And I completely disagree with the assessment of not everyone is a Joe Rogan. I think the beauty about podcasting 2.0 and value for value is not everyone needs to be a Joe Rogan. You will always have these outliers. You will always have power law distributions where some people just will, for some reason, be superstars. But it's value for value is about the long tail. It's about how many. We saw this with Patreon already. Like, this is not exclusive to Bitcoin. This is more about opening up the monetization options that people have and kind of democratizing this. Because how many patrons do you need on Patreon to be able to provide for your family, to pay rent and buy food? And if you're doing something that you absolutely love doing, what else do you need? You just need to make sure that the lights are on, that you have a roof over your head and enough food for your family. I mean, everything else is kind of, luxury or greed or what have you. And that's not too many people, you need a couple of hundred people paying $10 a month or whatever. And then suddenly you have a proper income. And I think way more people will be able to generate a proper income, all things considered, with value for value and podcasting 2.0 and all the rest that will come with it, than they are doing now, with all the middlemen in place, with YouTube, with Spotify, with, I don't know, Netflix, with Patreon, with whatever, because all these platforms take an insane cut. 20%, 50%, 60%, 80%, depending on the industry. If you look at authors, for example, the book industry, an author gets nothing. That's why Amazon was able to disrupt the whole industry with self-publishing alone. And with Amazon, I think they still take, depending on the prices, but they still take 50 or 60% cut or something like that, It's ridiculous. And so with value for value, all of that falls away. And yes, you will have to pay routing fees or whatever, but that's 1%. It's not 60%. And you can monetize the rest. If you have a couple hundred fans, that might be enough. And then suddenly you have a proper income and you can, as one person, again, feed your family and so on. So I completely disagree with the assessment that you need to be a Joe Rogan. That's the beauty of it. You will have a way more fractured system that is, you have way more pockets, and the pocket themselves can be larger. And there's no one that will steal from you. So there will be no platform in between. And that's why I'm so bullish on it all, because Bitcoin and Lightning is about creating protocols, not platforms. And platforms, all things considered, platforms are evil. You remember the motto that Google had? Don't be evil. Well, Google is a platform, so they had to remove this motto. That's just the way the world works. Because you are the platform, you are the man in the middle. You have the ability to take a 1%, 5%, 10%, 20% cut of all money that is generated. You have the ability to control the flow of information. You have the ability to censor people. You have the ability to deplatform people. You have the ability to create filters and rank order search results and all the rest of it. And every single platform is doing this. You have the control, and that's why the control will be abused. And that's why protocols are so insanely important, because they remove anyone who could have this control from the picture. It's very direct. It's very neutral. It's peer-to-peer. That's why the internet is so important. That's why net neutrality is so important, because the internet does not judge what kind of packets it routes. And similarly, the Lightning Network does not judge what kind of value it routes. And that's why these things are so insanely important.
Right. So now I think that's our the famous last words for this conversation. I thank you very much, Gigi, for all your insights. Of course, we still have lots of questions, but perhaps for another time. And
All right. Thanks again. Take care.
Yeah, take care.